Hi everyone, the search for the perfect Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot de Marseille hybrid deck goes on, and I've got one here that I want to review for you. But I was thinking the other day, I like reviewing decks, but it's not like reviewing books. You read a book and you tell people what you think of it. With the tarot deck, you look at the deck and you tell people what your feelings are about it. But a tarot deck is a tool that you use over the months or over the years. And it's difficult to know exactly whether that deck works for you before you've worked with it. So anyway, this is a first look at this deck, the Tarot de Marseille-Waite. And then maybe later I'll come back and tell you what it's like to read with it. It's from France, you get it online and it's pretty cheap, it's about 24 euros, and it's a relatively new tarot, and it's supposed to be a kind of hybrid of the Tarot de Marseille and the Rider-Waite-Smith. Now, I think that there is an idea coming into people's consciousness that the Rider-Waite-Smith is a great system, but the deck itself has a couple of problems. And I'm certainly one of these people. The more I read tarot, the more I wish I could find a kind of Marseille RWS hybrid. And they are actually cropping up all over the place. I will make a video about them soon. But for today, Le Tarot de Marseille-Waite, let's have a look. Now, I'm going to stick my neck out and say in advance that I'm going to give this deck a very good review because I just have the feeling that it's a pretty good tarot. I won't know until I've read with it, but for now my intuition tells me that this is a pretty good project. Having said that, having told you that I'm really going to give it a thumbs up, I'm going to start by telling you a couple of things about it that I don't like, and then we can go on to the positives. Okay, first of all, the box. The box is what I call a space hog. It is bigger than the cards. It's quite a lot bigger than the cards. And that is because the box is designed to accommodate the little white book, which is not little and isn't white. So, ladies and gentlemen, when I buy tarot cards, I want them to be in a box that fits the cards. So then I can just put them in the drawer and they're not wasting space. If you want to give your customers a nice box, give them a nice box like this one, the one that Julian Paco gave us for his very nice hidden message tarot. Here we have a rather luxurious box, which absolutely fits the cards. And Mr. Paco didn't even bother with a little white book because, frankly, do we really need them? That's the mistake number one. The little white book in this case is pretty good. It's bilingual, it's in French, and it's in English. There's one thing that annoyed me about this book. The deck is made by two people, Emmanuel Iger and Alice Laverty. Emmanuel Iger is the producer and Alice Laverty is the artist. And the two people are credited on the box there. But when you get to the book, only the producer, Emmanuel Iger, is credited, as if to say, I wrote the book. I think that's a bit ungenerous. My feeling is that when someone produces a tarot deck, when someone has an idea, let's do a Marseille-Waite hybrid deck, and then that person employs an artist and gives instructions and stands over their shoulder and makes sure they're getting it right. But I really cannot believe that the producer does as much work as the artist. The artist has to draw 78 drawings, and even if they're a bit sketchy, that's a lot of work. So please, let's credit the artist everywhere. This happened to Pamela Coleman Smith. But I've noticed in even some other decks, like the Neo Tarot, for example, that has the producer's name all over it, and you have to kind of like look around to find out who actually made these beautiful images. So that's a little annoyance, two little annoyances. And this book, even though it's quite a good little white book, and even though it is in two languages, and even though it's quite nicely designed, the production is a little bit hasty. There's one like major mistake on page 6, where in the English version, and page 6 is still in French. I'm sorry, but you could have just read that through and checked it. By the way, you get a little black pouch with this set. And I've noticed reviewers on YouTube saying how lovely that one gets a little black pouch. For me, that is just a symptom of this package being badly designed. As I say, please give me the box that fits the cards, not the box that doesn't fit the cards, and then this little pouch to put my cards in afterwards because you haven't given me a box. I don't like keeping cards in a little pouch. I like to see from the outside of the box which pack I'm dealing with. How could I see that if they were all wrapped up in little black pouches? Having said that, I think some of this booklet is pretty good and it contains a clear mission statement about the pack. So let's just focus on the positive points and listen to this. This is pretty good. The classic Tarot de Marseille deck is well liked. The major cards are simple and clear, sober yet powerful. On the other hand, the minors remain abstract, which I completely agree with. Consequently, most users only draw from the majors, which amounts to cutting the deck by 2/3. It is even more unfortunate because these minor cards speak of the concrete world. Reading them is therefore by nature much simpler and much more direct than the majors, which represent existential questions. Waite's minors are illustrated, so they are immediately readable, which is an improvement. However, his majors are overloaded. A useful change to invite the reader to personal symbolic work, but it can complicate their reading. I completely agree with that. Up until now, there was a dilemma on which to use simple majors and difficult minors with the Tarot de Marseille, or difficult majors and simple minors with Waite's. The best of both worlds had to be brought together. So this is what this deck does. It gives us something which I really appreciate, which is a restored major arcana with the advantages of a Rider-Waite-Smith style minor arcana. So if I go straight into the flip through, I will already be explaining to you why I like this deck. Look, from the second card, we've got Le Battleur. We haven't got the Magician, we've got the Juggler. And I think the Juggler, the mountebank, the Quack Doctor, is a much more useful, usable archetype than the Magician. And again, these early cards are a great relief to me. We get the female Pope, much better than the High Priestess. We get an Empress, a bit more sober than the Rider-Waite-Smith Empress. Both those cards are quite hardworking. And then we get a Pope. We don't get a silly old Hierophant who, frankly, whenever I see the Hierophant, I say to myself, well, it's clearly the Pope, isn't it? It's the Pope, ladies and gentlemen. It's the Pope. It's not some ancient Egyptian high priest, is it? So then we get a nice lover's card with the Cupid and the two women. And then we carry on. It's the early cards that I need to be Marseille style. So frankly, those early cards basically endear this deck to me. So we go through the major arcana. It is what it is. It's a bit sketchy, but we see these Marseille derivative images quite a lot. Now, I showed this deck there's a lovely old-fashioned death card. I showed this deck to my husband, who knows probably a bit more about the history of art than me, and we discussed what it was doing. The writers make clear in their book that they have drawn on, images from manuscripts from the 13th and 14th centuries. So, interestingly enough, for their stylistic inspiration, they've gone back to pre-tarot years, which I think is quite interesting because Pamela Coleman Smith drew her deck in a sort of Shakespearean style, which is entirely appropriate to the time of tarot's birth. Now, this deck goes back to 13th and 14th centuries, if you like, high Middle Ages, but that's pre-tarot. It's pastiche, isn't it? I think almost all tarots these days are pastiche. We're reminded of the 13th and 14th centuries, but if we were to put these cards next to manuscripts from the 13th and 14th centuries, we would see that, the body language is not really Middle Ages body language. But, I don't really demand tarot to be perfect in design terms. I want it to be readable. And so this deck has already scored fairly highly on that level, in that the makers of the deck have just fulfilled this brief of giving us a real Tarot de Marseille major and an RWS minor. The minors here are really not very different from Pamela's. It's what you would really call the minor arcana here is almost an RWS clone deck, isn't it? It's similar to something like, for example, the Golden Art Nouveau Tarot, a Lo Scarabeo production, where you sort of get Pamela's images sort of improved, sort of prettified up with the dodgy draftsmanship sort of corrected. This one is almost a clone, but that is fine. I think clone decks are fine. As we go on, you'll see that it isn't entirely a clone. Let me show you the swords. The swords are a bit gloomy, and I won't know until I've worked with this deck for a couple of months whether the cards are too gloomy. I'm a bit disappointed that you can't get it in bridge size. That, I think, is the first image that I've seen so far, which sort of is not terribly clear. It's not what the Germans would call plakativ. It doesn't jump out at you but most of the other images do. That's a bit of a gloomy 9. But, that is similar to Pamela's, and not quite such a disastrous image as Pamela's 10. Disastrous in graphic terms. And the coins. And I find that extremely similar. That the hat's gone, but it is extremely similar to Pam's, isn't it? And if you're going to do a clone, I quite like the way this has gone. I don't need tarots to be beautifully executed. I just need them to do the job, And you might have noticed that the minor arcana is differentiated from the major arcana by having slightly less lively colours. So if you look at that 10 there and you compare it to that, the colours on the majors are a little bit more juicy. There's a bit more red, in fact, and the blues are a bit more gorgeous. So the majors look a bit more expensive, don't they? A bit more like they came from heaven, whereas the minor is a bit more in the dust and the mud of everyday life. Now, I have kept the court cards till last. You might know that I'm a kind of a court card nerd. I suspect that many tarot designers don't quite appreciate the problems and complexities of the court cards and tend to sort of to back away from the challenges of designing good court cards. I think this deck is a case in point. I think they've just given us very simple kings and queens and knights and valets just holding the symbols they're meant to hold. In the cups here, you get a little bit of a RWS clone feeling. But actually, a lot of Pamela's symbolism has sort of fallen by the wayside, which I think is a pity because court cards are difficult to read and you need all the symbolic help you can get. I also think it's a pity that in this deck, all the knights are facing right, whereas in the Rider-Waite-Smith, they're not. And also I think it's odd that suddenly the King of Batons is facing right. There may be some precedent in the Marseille deck for that. I'm not enough of a Marseille reader to know. But about 3/4 of these are very recognisable, very easily recognisable if you're a Rider-Waite-Smith reader. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, Le Tarot de Marseille-Waite. Time will tell if it's going to become, a go-to tarot or whether I'm just going to drift away from it. Will I be able to live with this fake medievalism? Will it bother me that some of these faces, frankly, look a bit demented? Look at this lion. I think not really. Some of Pamela's images are a bit crazy. Not all her figures or her faces are credible. I suppose the difference is that the Tarot de Marseille-Waite is in this tarot, people are looking demented for sort of what you might call postmodern reasons. But you can't escape your time. This is the the world we live in. And I have a feeling that something about tarot decks needs to be fixed at the moment. And this is certainly a very interesting attempt to fix that. And, you know, as for the pouch, well, when I was 19, I thought it was great to wrap my tarot cards up in silk and all this sort of stuff. And it was only later that I realized that no, you absolutely really do want a box that fits the cards and has the title of the tarot on it. So I think this is a bit of a snare for a first-time tarot reader. But, you know, if you do buy this deck, I would say just for heaven's sake, keep the box. Because a deck without a box is like a kiss without a squeeze, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen? Okay. You have been watching Robert Farrar of Robert Farrar's Tea and Tarot. I'll be back next week. See you then. Comments below. Bye. Yet each man kills the thing he loves. By each let this be heard. Some do it with a bitter look, some with a flattering word. The coward does it with a kiss. The brave man with a sword.